To draw this sketch, we'll use a tool called Spline. As you can see, these sections are created with spline curves. But what's the difference between a spline and the arc tool we used earlier? The arc tool creates a circular arc with a constant radius. Mathematically, this means the rate of change of slope or curvature is constant, which is exactly why we get a perfect circular arc. However, in a spline, the rate of change of slope is not constant. It varies along the curve. As you can see, the slope changes much more sharply in this section. So even visually, it's easy to see when a spline is the right choice and when an arc is more appropriate. To draw this sketch, I'll first use arcs, just like before, up to this point. And then I'll explain how to use the spline tool for the remaining section. So first, using the arc tool, I draw a curve with a radius of 550 millimeters and an angle of 52 degrees. I enter a sketch on the front plane. I select the arc tool and choose the third type. Radius 550 millimeters and 52 degrees. First click, second click, third click. 52 degrees. And a horizontal distance of 550 millimeters. Again, using the arc tool, I draw one with a radius of 700 millimeters and an angle of 34.5 degrees. Select the third type. Radius 700 millimeters and 34.5 degrees. Now a radius of 1,230 millimeters and an angle of 15.65 degrees. I also draw the center line. Like this. Now for this section, we'll use the Spline tool. From the Sketch tab, I select the Spline tool. I click a point here, another here, and the next one here. Then I dimension the positions of these points relative to the origin. So I set vertical ordinate dimensions of 345 millimeters and 510 millimeters. The origin is at 0. And these vertical distances are 345 millimeters and 510 millimeters. And here you see the horizontal distances. So I use horizontal ordinate dimension, set the 0 at the origin, and click these points. The dimensions are 45, 120, 218.5 millimeters, and 510 millimeters. Now, as you can see, the sketch is fully defined. But when you use the spline tool, you'll notice handles at each control point. These handles represent how sharply the spline curves at each point. The angle of the spline handle shows the tangent direction of the curve at that point. The length of the spline handle represents the magnitude of the curvature. The longer the handle, the sharper the curve bends at that point. You can clearly see that here. To fully define the sketch, we also need to constrain these spline handles. As you can see, these two handles need to be vertical, and this one needs to be horizontal. I click this control point to display the handle arrow. Then, I select the handle and make it vertical. Same here. First, I roughly drag it to make it vertical. Then I apply the vertical relation. This one I first drag close to horizontal, then apply the horizontal relation. So, we've added two vertical relations and one horizontal relation to the spline handles. Next, we set the handle lengths. I read the dimension from here. Handle lengths of 320, 300, and 375 millimeters. Handle length of 320. The 300 millimeter handle length shown here is actually the combined length of the left and right handles at this control point. Each side has its own length, and together they total 300 millimeters. The drawing doesn't give separate values, but we can clearly see that both sides are equal, so each handle is 150 millimeters to make the total 300 millimeters. First, I make the handles equal, then drag them so each one is about 150 millimeters. Here, one handle is 330 millimeters and the other is 174 millimeters. I drag both down toward 150 millimeters. Now we're at 150 millimeters on one side. I just drag the other one to 150 millimeters too. Now, I set the total to 300 millimeters, and both handles snap to exactly 150 millimeters each. We get 150 millimeters and 149 millimeters. Close enough. They're almost identical. Then for this control point, I set the handle length to 375 millimeters. Now, the sketch is fully defined. Everything stays exactly where we want it. Next, for the remaining section, I draw another spline in a new sketch to keep everything nice and clean. I hide the relations. I mirror the entire shape and exit the sketch. Now, I start a new sketch on the front plane and draw the spline the same way. A vertical dimension of 53 millimeters. The sketch is now fully defined except for the spline handle lengths. We still need to set those. Angle of 15 degrees with a handle length of 130 millimeters. 15 degrees. And 130 millimeters for this handle. Again, using Smart Dimension, I click the control point to bring up the spline handle, then set 15 degrees. And 130 millimeters. Here, the total handle length is 130 millimeters, so 65 millimeters on each side. Just like before, I adjust both handles towards 65 millimeters each. One's at 79 millimeters. I just pull it down towards 65 millimeters. Then, I set the total handle length to 130 millimeters. And I align it horizontally. And that completes the sketch.